Welcome to the Shaman Stories podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and with me today's guest is Rose Aquilla. Rose is an intuitive healer studying to be a chiropractor. Welcome, Rose.
Hello.
So, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do today with your practices?
Hey, so what I am doing currently is a reflection of just so many roads over so many years and so many experiences. From the get-go, as a child, I definitely knew that I was a different kid. I was raised by my really awesome grandparents who are both no longer with us, and I was very fortunate that they had already had some rough draft kids of their own, and they also had 200 acres of beautiful farmland to let me go wander about. The few times that I did live with my mom, it wasn't always great, and she did the best she could with the tools she had in her toolbox. But I definitely came away from my childhood with some significant trauma, and that allowed me to start learning lessons at a really young age that I was different, and I had experienced different things, and I also got to experience a significant amount of othering from other children because I knew I was different and I had experienced different things. Of course, being raised by grandparents, that too. So all of that set me up, I think, to be on that rigorous healer's journey and healer's path and the spiritual path. And there was religious trauma as a child as well. My mom thought that the Christian church could save both of us and redeem both of us. And they don't take kindly to a very young child asking and challenging them with very adult questions in a spiritual way because spirit was moving through me very early. Um, so that was an interesting experience, and I'm grateful that I had it. It's definitely been able to equip me to defend and do the work that I'm doing now. Which fast forward to 40 years later, here I am in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm grateful to be here and meet and be in the community that I'm in, and learn that that othering is actually just a really beautiful gift to be used and to advocate for my community and be a part of community and what that means. And it's a really incredible experience to have to come into that knowing and that realization and learn Reiki and learn other methods of energy healing and learn somatics, and be in an environment where things like chiropractic are accepted and encouraged. And there's a chiropractor on every street corner practically. And there's beautiful people to meet. You just have to, and then it's not like you have to seek them out. They're not hidden from the muggles, so to speak. Everyone's just here, and it's beautiful.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about your childhood. So, you mentioned your mother being very religious and everything, but what do you define as the othering? What does that mean for you?
So I grew up in Maryland, which is very different from Washington State. So, and back in the 80s, especially, and being a young, cisgendered female, and being different. And when I say different, so speaking clinically and in a mundane sense, back then, and I from jump, I've been neurodivergent. I was autistic, nonverbal, ADHD, you name it. Alphabet soup could have been my diagnosis back then for sure, but that didn't happen. I was just, a sensitive girl, or there were just the hushed hushed voices talking about me and why I was different, and my grandparents just hid me away a lot. I didn't get to hang out with a lot of other kids. I didn't get to do a lot of other things. Also, I just refused to talk except to animals. I would speak to animals and trees and plants, and I had this super vivid imagination that was my world. But when it came to interacting with other humans, I was scared and I didn't know how, and I didn't want to. And when I was forced to, I would have meltdowns that looked like what we now would qualify as an autistic meltdown, complete with self-harm.
So what helped you or inspired you to like begin that spiritual journey to get out of that mindset? Because I can't imagine what it's like living in that way as a child. What helped bring you out of that shell to, because you're not like that today. You're not that's not the Rose I know.
Yeah, no, the Rose that you know now, but it's why I can relate to children. When I look at a child and I can sense it. I always make the joke is like, oh, they don't smell like that to me. They quote don't smell like bipolar to me, or they don't smell like a borderline to me. It's just a joke way of me saying with my sixth sense being like, no, I can perceive them on levels that maybe you can't. And my perception of them is I identify it, I recognize it, I understand that resonates, and here, treat them this way. And all of a sudden that person has success interacting with that individual. And it's like, no, because I was that individual. And that's how we can understand where it was like back then I had no control over my environment. And children and animals don't really have control over their environment. So much like the amazing Temple Grandin, um, and finding and what so to answer your question, what got me out of it is the fact that research and things started happening. People like Temple Grandin started to be heard and experienced. And I could rattle off a bunch of names of people who pioneered that work back then. But I was very blessed to have people come into my world. My grandmother was incredibly receptive and open. And even though we were secluded and rural, we had friends, my familiar friends, that would come along and be like, no, she's not damaged goods, or there's nothing wrong. She's not the weird girl. She's not this or that. She's gifted and intelligent and special, and put her in different environments and she excels. Put her in these environments and she fails. Um, Unfortunately, I did end up spending more years with my mom later on in my childhood than was ideal. And she put me into a Christian church school where I ended up getting expelled because I would do things like question, or I masked really hard, and masking is a survival skill. My masking was to be really rebellious and to dig in really deep because especially neurosparkly people, we have that deep sense of injustice and justice. And I was experiencing a lot of injustice, not just for me, but people around me. Like I would get uncontrollably angry when somebody would get picked on, and I would wind up getting in fights because I would be defending somebody that was getting picked on, and I would end up catching the rap. And I would then try and explain myself, and then I would get told to shut up. So things of that nature, I started acting out and masking, and then I was just like, fine, I'm going to lean into this bad girl thing more than anything else. And so then, especially in a Christian environment, it was, well, you need the devil's in you. And it's like, well, no, the devil's not in me, but okay, fine, if that's what you got to tell yourself. And it was that sort of quote insubordination that got me expelled, and fortunately, got me sent back to my grandparents, who were like, oh, Lord, let's homeschool you and then get you into public school. And it was like, oh, thank all the gods. But by then it was high school. So there was I found the theater kids and I survived just fine there because I was finally surrounded by my people. So it's going from, obviously in this environment, I'm just going to end up being bad and having more behaviors that are undesirable. But you put me into the correct environment and you're going to get the behaviors that you're looking for because it's a better environment that allows me to thrive. I.e., I found community, I found the theater kids, I found people who were just like me. And I remember being 16 years old and going, wait, what? This is normal? And everyone's like, yeah, that's totally normal. I'm like, no way, cool. And it was like, wait, you want to be normal? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. You don't understand what I've been through. So that's kind of, I mean, I could go on and we could spend the next 2 hours just talking about environmental, impact on neurosparkly people or spiritual people or however you want to quote label us, whatever box you need. Boxes are important. I could talk about that too. But that's to answer your question. Yeah, it's what was that like? Well, yeah, it was hellacious and it was horrible. But what kept me going is the fact that spirit was there. I knew spirit the whole long. It's like, you know, deep inside of you that you're not bad. You know, deep inside of you, you're here for a purpose. I'm also, to put too fine a point on it, I'm a failed abortion. I made it through. Despite my mom trying to not have me here, I was coming. And so from jump, spirit has always been like, you're here for a purpose. And it's a healer's journey. I didn't know when I was a child it was a healer's journey, but you have to experience all of the highs and the lows and all of the good and the bad and everything in between on a healer's journey so that you can be there to hold space when the person who has sought you out is at their deepest, darkest. You're not going to blink.
Mhm.
And then when they're at their highest, you can raise your voice in praise and joy because you know, and it allows you to be relatable. And that's what for me, it's the definition of being a safe space is it's like, no, I've been there. I know what the demons are. I can name them. We're friends. It's okay. I got you.
So tell me a little bit about your grandmother. I mean, you mentioned your intuitiveness, your sixth sense when you see things or look at people. Was she kind of the same way? Do you think you got that from her?
I absolutely know that yes, I did. And it's interesting because now that I know what I know, I have the education I do, both mundane and magical. Um, I can look back and I have wept for her, and I might even shed tears during this interview. December is a rough month for me. Her birthday and the beginning of her death was all in the December. So she would have been classified these days as both autistic, ADHD, anxiety disorder, CPTSD, RSD, alphabet soup too. And I read a lot of her childhood letters and diaries I found after she was no longer with us and read through them and had huge cathartic on the floor, soupy cries, being like, oh, I wish I could have been her best friend when she was little or when she was first married or all of these things. She was also she wanted a very non-traditional life and she was not able to have it because of what society was back then. So when I would tell her things like I could hear things, or I believed I studied Joan of Arc in school and I ran to her and I went, I'm like Joan. And my grandmother's eyes got huge and she was like, don't say that too loud. It's not safe. You can tell me, but you can't tell anybody else. You'll get hurt. They hurt me. And I was like, what? And so she explained to me that when you have gifts like that, it's not safe. And so that also reinforced masking to me and trying to live in the broom closet um, until, again, overwhelming compulsion being like, I can't, I won't, I don't care if it's dangerous. I've dealt with some pretty awful, scary stuff in my life. I'm pretty tough. I'm coming out of the broom closet. And my grandmother was horrified. um, but then later on, as she watched me, and she was just like, I'm proud of you. Don't ever go back in. You're stronger than I am, sweetie. And so yeah, she was a huge inspiration and she made sure she introduced me to really cool people. She never called it magic. She didn't call it the same things we do. She didn't understand what shamanism is. When I started teaching those things to her, she was older in life. She thought it was really cool. But of course, back in the day, she just had different names for it all.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the word shamanism wasn't even really coined until about the mid 80s. So it's,
Yeah. She loved learning the mundane sides of things too. And so that was really cool being able to be like, no, this is, and then she's kind of my reason why I believe labeling is a bit important. Because if you're going to spend your whole life trying to be a chestnut thoroughbred horse, when really you're a rainbow sparkle zebra, you're going to constantly feel like crap and your life is going to be miserable because you suck at being a chestnut thoroughbred horse because you're really a kick-ass, amazing rainbow sparkle zebra. And that is, I think, the best way that I've been able to sum up my entire life is like, I tried so hard to be a chestnut thoroughbred horse. I dreamed about it. I had pictures of them on my walls. I wanted nothing more. If I could just be that chestnut thoroughbred, my life would be perfect. when really it was like, no, honey, why are you doing that? Because that's not you at all. This is who you really are. I mean, like, you can will yourself to try and be anything. I look in the mirror and will myself to be a chestnut thoroughbred horse. But nope, nope, rainbow sparkle zebra it is.
Yeah, that's always a tough thing with kids. I mean, all kids. I'm going through it now with my own children. It's they all want to fit in, they all want to look the same, dress the same, and it's like if they step out of line, they might get made fun of, and it's like, dude, you're not going to see these people most likely in the next 5 years. Just do you. Like, just do what you want to do, because eventually you're going to have to make that choice. But we always get stuck in that conformity of everything, trying to fit in so we don't get made fun of or bothered.
Right. And the worst possible thing too is getting the advice because my mom's message would be different. My mom would be like, you can be anything you want to be and anything you need to be and be the chestnut thoroughbred. You can do it. And it's like, well, I'm failing at it though. Well, then try harder, and it's, but wear these clothes and you'll be a chestnut thoroughbred horse. Say these things and you'll be that. Wear this makeup, do that thing. My mom was that person. Whereas my grandmother was on the other side being just laughing maniacally and being like, no. No, you can be anything you want to be. And I was like, well, I want to be a child. She said, why? And I was the person who was like, well, because, but because isn't an answer. Why? If that means that you're not going to be able to talk to animals anymore, do you still want to do it? If that means that you're going to be spending your days at the mall instead of out in the woods with your sprites, do you really want to do it?
Hmm.
And all of the things that back then were really important to me. And she would even say like what about your friend in whatever, I had imaginary friends. She would talk about my friends. She'd bring them up by name and she would be like, what would happen if you couldn't see them anymore or talk to them anymore? Would you still want to do it? And it's like, oh, no. But my mom will love me if I do that. My mom loves chestnut thoroughbred horses. She doesn't love rainbow sparkle zebras.
Hmm.
And that was the first time that I had to stop and go, oh, wait, my mom doesn't love me. So it's a lot to process when you're, 11, 12 years old. But I started processing it and it was pretty impressive. And my grandmother was huge to be that safe, amazing place to catch me when I would have those moments and I'd turn and look at her and and some of the other aunties that aren't blood aunties that my grandmother brought into my life to help me would say things just kind of like, your mom, no, she doesn't love you. She loves a concept of you, but also it's not about you. It's about her. She doesn't love herself. And I started learning about that concept of a self really young, and I'm very grateful for that. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, but at least the concept was planted.
Hmm. Did that relationship with your mother ever get any better?
So it's taken a long time, many, 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 many moons, and it has lots of ups and downs. Um, but I have to say that's what launched me into wanting to learn why. I am the perpetual 2-year-old. I want to know why. So I was like, well, why does she hate herself? Why does she hate me? What's going on? So I discovered psychology. So I've had a toe in both worlds for a long time, and sometimes I shift into one completely and out of the other, and vice versa. Now I think I walk both worlds really well of spirit and mundane science, psychology, blah, blah, blah. But I wanted to understand. And so I started going down the rabbit trails of what happens when someone who is just as amazing and sparkly and gifted and spiritual chooses to be the chestnut thoroughbred instead of the sparkle zebra. And that was my mom, because she was a really sparkly kid, apparently, but chose the other way and decided that conformity and safety and society and all of those things was more important than keeping imaginary friends. She drank the Kool-Aid
Hmm.
and conformed. And when you are destined to not do that and you really push back that hard, the universe goes, okay, suit yourself. And you end up with all of these interesting psychological things. And so learning that she was definitely manic depressive, bipolar, and all of those other labels kind of helped me understand how to handle her, negotiate, work with her over the years. And sometimes I've had to go no contact. And then other times I've fought really hard and against everything had a relationship. And fast forward to the present time, and she's honestly kind of my greatest teacher because she really can't wrap her head around who I am and what I'm trying to do with my world at all. And it's fun that we do still engage and treat each other with respect because I'll sit and get a chance to talk to her and then listen to myself as I'm doing so and go, oh, okay. Oh, I'm hearing this now. Oh, okay. Got it. And what she says back to me helps me challenge my own belief system a little bit and go, okay, I need to sit with that a little more or or reflect on that differently.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad it's kind of working out. It sounds like it is.
Yeah, it's interesting to be able, we can have a dinner. We can go and enjoy, a day in Seattle seeing a theater show together. We still have mutual ground,
Hmm.
performing arts and things like that. And what's now my hobby of doing audio and video engineering and lighting design for theater is something that we can bond on, and we'll go see shows together and talk about them and hang out and whatnot. But it's more like having a friend. It's not like having a mom. I can't call her when I'm crying about something. When somebody hurts my feelings, or I just want my mom, or I'm frustrated with my husband, she's not my phone call, and that sucks. But I have so many amazing other people that, yeah, I'm good.
So let's go back a little bit. You mentioned using Reiki and shamanism. What drew you towards those modalities? Like I also know you kind of do some other forms of magic as well. So do you find using that was helping you with your alphabet soup, so to speak?
Yeah, it's interesting because they found me. I never quested to find Reiki or shamanism or any of those things. And that's how now at the time, I didn't know what was happening in my world, but I can sit back and look at my life and go, wow, that is the true healer's journey. Things come to you.
Mhm.
Um, it's really wild. Reiki found me in a moment where I was really living more in the mundane world. And I had just gotten to Washington State, and my then husband, when I had his first deployment, a bunch of things, just our world was in chaos. And our dog at the time, who, had always been more of his dog, didn't understand why we took daddy to base and we dropped him off, and he didn't come home with us. And for days, he didn't come home. And I was beside myself. I didn't know how to function. And then we had just gotten here, and I didn't know anyone at all. And the army was as supportive as they aren't. And things were scary. It was weird. I was stressed. I didn't know how to process what was going on. And it was very triggering for all the abandonment and the weirdness. And so um, the dog stopped eating. She didn't want to go outside. She would just curl up by the door, and she got aggressive with me. And which was hard for me because then I couldn't talk to her. And so I tried to, bust out my mouth. It was like, oh, wait, I used to be this cool person that could do cool things. But there was such a block. There was just something there that wasn't working. And magic found me. And I think I stumbled across something for the Kindred Souls Foundation. And I was like, well, maybe I need to foster a dog. Maybe she just needs a dog. She needs a friend. Um, so she was used to being a farm dog before we came out here, and so maybe she just needs more dog friends. We were living in an apartment at the time. There was no base housing, and so okay, I'll just foster a dog. Through Kindred Souls, they were like, well, we work with an animal communicator. And we like to have everybody check in with this animal communicator and make sure that fostering is the right thing for them, and entrance to Chandra Mitchell, an incredible Reiki master who is also a very good friend. But here going on, I think 15 years ago now, I didn't know anything about it, never heard about Reiki, didn't know much at all. And fast forward, long story short, the day we met Chandra, I just looked at her and was like, oh my God, you're going to change my whole life. I was thinking that, and she introduced herself to me, and she looked at me, and she's like, "I'm about to completely kick your world over." And yeah, I had my first Reiki session a couple of days later, and I didn't tell her anything about me. Facebook wasn't really a big deal for us back then. She couldn't have gotten any of the details. She described so many things about my world. She was bawling her eyes out during our session. I was on the strangest trip I had ever been on for myself. It was incredible. And we were talking about things after the session, and we're both just like snot crying and holding each other. She was like, this is your calling." And at the time I was like, "But I am such a disaster and I'm such a mess." And she was like, "That's the journey. That's the journey. And we're going to be together a long time, and you're going to go on an incredible journey."
Hmm.
So that's how I found Reiki, and that kicked it all off. That led me down such an incredible path that opened me up. And as soon as I was opened up to the world around me, I saw shamanism, I saw all these different things, and it was like, this is so cool. And I started meeting all these incredible people. And some of them I just, we've known each other obviously for millennia, and found each other again. So it's just cool.
Nice. And did you guys figure out what the dog needed?
We did figure out what the dog needed. the so yeah, she was able to do the communication, and it was in that same day we met each other, and after she got done saying, "I'm gonna kick your world over," she was like, "You might want to pull your phone out of your pocket. You're about to get a phone call. And you need to put it on speaker because your dog needs to hear his voice." And I just was like, "Huh?" And then my phone rang, and it was an identified phone number, unidentified, didn't know anything. And it was him saying, "Hey, we finally got to Kuwait. I'm so sorry I haven't been able to call you. Is everything okay? This is all just, I mean, wow, what a shit show, ha ha ha." And immediately his dog just lost her mind. She was like, "Oh my God, Daddy, I needed to hear him. I needed to know he was okay." And Chandra like yelled into the phone, "You don't know me, but you need to talk to your dog right now." So yeah, it was pretty incredible. And that's why I just sat there, and it was Spirit knew what my quote science brain really needed to experience right in that moment was like, you needed that unarguable proof that this woman is real, that Spirit is real. I needed to be reminded about who I was, and that I had kind of fallen into the trap that the military kind of wants you to, which is conform, 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 conform. Your old identity means nothing. That's not real. This is what's real. And I was going along with it, but I lost myself. So I just, yeah, and that was the lesson I took from that was it's okay. You have to walk in that world, but don't forget who you are. Who you are can still walk in that world.
And so with that, you found Reiki. So did you start becoming a Reiki practitioner right off the bat, or you just work with her? How did you utilize it?
So I appreciate what Chandra does. She's never been a Reiki in a box person. She respects that it's a very unique pathway for each individual, and that when you're really truly called to this, um, it's not something that you can just do on the internet in a weekend.
Hmm.
And I had so much to process that I was out of the broom closet, but I could have been classified at that point in time more of a like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or, Charmed witch, or Harry Potter witch. I was studying things and learning things and practicing things, and it was a bit of an identity and whatnot. It wasn't fully there. I hadn't started to look at myself deeply and process a lot of my stuff,
Hmm.
especially the mom stuff. So what Chandra and I did was we did a lot of intensive Reiki healing sessions. We did a lot of, and she was just finding her way onto the shamanism path as well. And so she kind of helped me along with that, with journeying and meditations and the art of giving up some stuff, and just some really cool things, and kind of feeling safe enough in a safe space for the first time, working through those wounds, exploring those wounds, like what is going on here? Why does this come up for me this way? Um, because in order to fully step into being a Reiki master and having that integrity in the practice, you have to keep your own self clean first. And I was not a clean slate. So we did that work first. And so my attunements um, were like a very long, spread out process.
Okay, yeah, and I know a lot of teachers who do that. I've also been to places where you get level 1 through 3 in a weekend, and then you just practice on your own. I've seen both. It sounds like she's way more than just your standard Reiki practitioner.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, Chandra's incredible. She's still in practice in Tumwater, and I feel like the right people find her when they need to.
Hmm.
Because, and I said the same thing. She's very humble, but I'm like, no, you are so much more. I would classify you, if I had to, as a medicine woman. You are a wayfinder. Yeah, that's more of, you're not just an animal communicator who's a badass Reiki practitioner. You're a true medicine woman. You might not be the grand poobah whatever shaman, but you are the person that helps people along their way and gets them into that next step to help them find their whatever ultimate is. And that's a powerful place to be too.
Yeah, agreed. And so after you did the Reiki clearing, what was your next step? When we met, you were doing intuitive massages on people. And so it seems like we're getting to that journey of how you got there.
Yeah.
Curious.
Yeah, so for sure. Yeah, and so um I knew I never wanted to be like a licensed massage practitioner. I always wanted to do more of that energetic somatic healing work. But I wanted to learn, I wanted to get the education of massage. And there was also a side to me that's, still there's always the wounded healer side. So we all have scars. My wounds are there, and sometimes they crack open a little bit. And I would get a little lost on my journey, but then I would also realize, no, it's just part of the journey. And there's just something I needed to learn here. And going to massage school was a big one. I thought, well, maybe I'm going to be a Reiki practitioner that does massage. Like fitting into that whole stereotypical Pacific Northwest queer girl box. The queer girl, queer white kid with dreadlocks who drives a Subaru, and has 2.1 dogs, and yeah, that kind of thing. I tried that on for a moment to be like, well, maybe this is who I am. Um, and really, I just learned, I was like, nope, I still don't, I'm still not that awesome and comfortable with people just yet. And so being a massage therapist was not my gig, but it tickled the fancy of science, of learning more about the human body and anatomy and physiology, and which is something I've always loved. Part of that wounded healer journey way back when, and as an adolescent, was being a volunteer firefighter who became a paramedic and worked in a trauma center for a while. Because the traumatized person's really good in a crisis, and the neurodivergent kids are really good in a crisis. We're just terrible at answering the phone. But man, when someone's bleeding to death on the side of the road, we're who you want. So massage school was fun because it was like, wait, I get to practice all these cool things I already know, anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, in a not crisis, terrible environment, right? I'm healing people instead of just keeping them from dying. And there is a difference, which is why I never became a medical doctor or a nurse. I tried all that on. I have like half of a pre-med, and I was an paramedic LPN, and I was like, this isn't healing people.
Hmm.
I'm really smart. I'm stupid smart. I'm savant like when it comes to learning this stuff, but it's not scratching the itch. It's not healing people. I'm just making them feel better, or I'm keeping them from dying. I'm not contributing to them thriving. I'm not and healing, I don't even like using the word healing anymore, because it's like, no, that's not my role. That's not my job. That's not what I'm doing. I'm facilitating their growth. I'm facilitating their journey. I'm getting them further along. But the more I've come along my own pathway, the more clearly I can hear spirit, and spirit's like, no, that's not for you, but you need that knowledge. Like, I want you to have this experience because you need the knowledge. You're going to have experiences that you need here, but it's not your ultimate destination. So yeah, I Reiki, massage, all of that helped me find somatics. And then I tripped and fell over The Body Keeps the Score, which is my form of a Bible, and canon, and my foundation. In chiropractic communities, we always talk about our why for chiropractic, and mine is Bessel van der Kolk's work and what he started, which is the study of trauma on the body, which led me now to my new favorite person in the universe is Dr. Heidi Horvick and her documentation work and what that looks like. So it's the mundane, which allows me to talk to the muggles and lets me move in scientific communities and get doctor in front of my name, which gets me credibility. I personally don't believe in if you have paper on your wall or not, but in this world, we need to have paper on the wall for the muggles, and the muggles need healing too. So, um, yeah, it's important to be able to have all of that, study all of that, get those experiences. But then the further down I've gone that pathway, the closer I've gotten to spirit too, because I sit here and I'm studying neurons and I'm studying neuroplasticity and interoception and all these big fancy words. But what really for me, I'm processing it through the lens of being a spirit-led person and being a practitioner and going, God, spirit is so cool. Like these meat suits are dope as fuck, like yeah, it's an interesting way to look at things, and it's been a fun journey to go down that. And it all started with, spirit coming along with these little nudges here and there, and then energy work is incredible to kick off a career like this.
Agreed. And it's true what you said too about healing, because we don't heal anybody. Even my own teacher, Alberto, he's like, you're not a healer. You're just removing things out of their energetic field so that they can heal themselves. A
Correct.
lot of what we do is we're just resetting. When I'm working on someone with PTSD or depression, we don't remove the past of what happened. We're just removing the triggers that are left behind, the imprints of it. And so that when the same situation comes up, they can now choose, do I want to act in the old way that my triggers kept making me do it? Or do I want to start something fresh and not let it bother me? And we're not healing anyone. We're just allowing energy to flow through us and just removing the blockages.
Right, which is kind of how I draw the, and you summed it up perfectly, because a subluxation based chiropractor, which is my pathway, is the same. I'm not doing anything except removing an impedance, a subluxation from your central nervous system, which is allowing your central nervous system to function better. And more, how it's intended to be. The vitalistic chiropractor, the subluxation based practice that's in a nutshell what it is. Removing the impedance to allow the body to do what it is designed to do, which is heal itself, function in the way it's designed to be. And so shamanism, energy work, that side of the world it goes hand in hand with the practice that I've ultimately found myself building, and it's beautiful. This is what it's supposed to be. This is how it is supposed to be, and it's really really cool. So that being a healer, the first time I ever got called that, I was like, wow, I love that. Thank you. Just like I was always taught, a shaman never calls themselves a shaman. Someone comes along and gives them the title.
Mhm.
Just like there's the story about, you never buy a tarot deck, it's given to you. And I'm like, oh, yeah, whatever. Um, so it's yeah, I was like, thank you for calling me healer. I really appreciate that. But no, I am not that at all. I'm a wayfinder. I'd rather be called a medicine woman, like how I call Chandra a medicine woman. Or like my other pivotal spiritual energetic mama, Sadie Whip, the dragon mother. Yeah, she's incredible. Same thing. Not a healer. Nope. Mm-mm. Tough love giver, absolutely. Calls you into accountability, calls you into integrity and authenticity, sure, but not a healer. And that level of tough love has definitely, gotten me where I am, because there's a certain connotation in our community where we're all spiritual love and light, and we're all supposed to be soft and forgiving. And well, sometimes safety isn't gonna look soft and loving. Because yeah, getting called into integrity and getting called into authenticity and accountability, whether it be mundane or spiritual, is a rough experience. And it sometimes has to be done in a slightly more harsh and tough way, but it's still truly an act of love.
And so let's talk about the chiropractor side of this. So what drew you towards that? I mean, you kind of touched a little bit on it, but you went from your childhood, a little bit of Reiki, some intuitive massage, EMT. Now it's, chiropractic. What drew you to chiropractic, and how do you plan on using your intuitive energy work with that? Because that sounds very interesting to be able to mix the two together.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think it always started with, that calling of being called into, quote, the healing arts, which I'll jive with that for that title for a second. So I thought what that looked like, was firefighting and paramedic work and emergency rooms and hospitals, and the traditional pathway, which my grandfather really wanted me to be a doctor. And I was very strongly encouraged. Maryland at the time had a really cool program with University of Maryland that, because so much of their um, first responders are volunteers, you volunteer, you get to go to University of Maryland and take the classes and get education that, falls back into first responder stuff. So I was like, cool, I can go all the way through being an ER doc, maybe even a trauma surgeon. And like, maybe this is what being a healer is going to be for me. And like I said before, it's like, no, this is just keeping people from dying. This is not healing anybody. This is not, yeah, nope, not, this ain't it. But for the longest time, I was like, well, I'm going to give it a try, bash my head against that wall. Um, and I tried many different iterations of it. And back home, there's not a chiropractor on every street corner. Back home, chiropractic at the time, again, bear in mind, this is back in like the 90s and early 2000s. Um, Chiropractic was still like ambulance chasers and icky bad bad. So I didn't even get my own chiropractic treatment until I got out here. And I met my first chiropractor and had my first adjustment on hay bales in a barn because he was treating horses. And I also got my own treatment. And it was one of those massive cornerstone, keystone experiences like meeting Chandra, meeting Reagan Golab, Dr. Reagan Golab was that for me. And it was like my first adjustment was incredible. And I've been a horse girl my whole life. So I was full of physical, mundane stuff that needed to be addressed, but also my central nervous system was chaotic and from all of the trauma it had experienced from the womb to that point. And Reagan really helps me understand that. It was like, oh, okay. So that started my chiropractic journey, and I've done as much as I can to standard chiropractic care. Something I haven't talked about is I have some just medical trauma. I had to have a hysterectomy when I was 25, and it was, I believe now looking back, spirit really came across, and that's like a whole other episode in and of itself of how I was given a cancer and what needed to be done and how it really impacted my life. But I experienced what I now would call like my I got betrayed. It was like I thought that contemporary medicine, allopathic medicine was really okay. It was a safe space. And I became, quote, a victim. And I allowed myself to be victimized for a time by it and got betrayed and went through a lot of horrible trauma and was like, I can't believe this happened to me. And so I ran screaming into holistic medicine, which I never really truly experienced back home. We were, a kind household, but we weren't, my grandmother was not a hippie. And she didn't believe in a bunch of plant medicine and herbs. She didn't care if I wanted to study it and learn about it, but it wasn't something we practiced. So I didn't get that practice until I came out here. I met Reagan. Reagan, again, another pathfinder, another medicine man to help me on my journey, and started showing me different resources, getting me chiropractically adjusted, teaching me about all sorts of cool stuff, and introducing me to people who were going to teach me more about more cool stuff. And it started with holistic horse care and how to help my horse who was allergic to everything experience holistic stuff. And then for myself, and it was like, wow, if you've been in menopause since you were 25, what are you doing? And I was taking chemicals and things of that nature. And he's like, no, 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 stop that. That just makes me need to adjust you more. And teaching me subluxation, teaching me chemical trauma. And when you take this chemical, this is what happens in your body and how it can um, cause these issues and how to treat that. And I mean, that, like I said, at this point, this is like 15 years ago. So here we are 15 years later, and I'm the one who's working alongside a chiropractor and helping with patient education while I'm in my own education, explaining to people what's going on. Then I was like, this is results. This is how we actually change things. This is the impact we make, and learning about neurochemistry and how chiropractic adjustments influence neurochemistry and how that can help with the symptom alleviation of ADHD, autism, um, and of course, PTSD and trauma, which is my biggest calling because I've experienced so much trauma and I do have CPTSD and I've had alphabet soup for so long. It was like, I don't want to just put band-aids on symptoms,
Hmm.
which is what standard allopathic medicine is all about. Um, and I don't want to be a doctor because I want a prescription pad. I want to be a doctor because it puts a piece of paper on a wall that allows me to legally put my hands on somebody and actually help truly treat them and enable them to experience healing. That is why I want a piece of paper on the wall. I want to be that person. I'm not putting band-aids on symptoms. I'm going to help your body actually heal itself and create more neurochemistry that's helps your dopamine get to where it needs to go, that's going to change your brain structure, that's going to give you new neural pathways, increase your resilience, increase your neuroplasticity. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is gonna be its own TED Talk, its own episode completely. But yeah, getting off my soapbox for a second, that's a really long answer.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's very interesting of mixing everything together because it's true. It's like I work on the energetic level with people, but not the physical. I I can't fix your broken arm. I can't put your spine back into place. I can help remove some of that emotional baggage, that part of the trauma, the energetic trauma, but you also need someone who can do the physical side too. And so,
Right. Yeah, for sure. Being able, but what you can do, what any, what an energetic practitioner does is so important to work alongside of someone even in non-allopathic. And what I'm doing with the osteopathic work is you're still doing, I mean, connecting to that energetic body because we all have an energetic body out there that's still whole, that's still beautiful, that's still pristine, and connecting to that is so healing. So I mean, in cultures that don't have medical doctors, they have the shaman, and the shaman works on the broken arm. I like to make that argument to people, being like, so what happens in cultures where they don't have a medical doctor with a piece of paper on the wall? There's still a healer in the village, that's going to work with that person. It's going to provide the bone set herb that's going to be able to make the poultice, but that's also doing the energetic work. That's also connecting that person to their perfect energetic being on another plane and helping them to facilitate healing in that way. So it's all so incredibly perfect. I love how you described your perception, your optic of shamanism as removing the impedance. I'm like, you remove energetic subluxation. Yay! This, I mean, we're just here doing the same thing in the central nervous system. It's a really good way of putting it.
yeah, and sometimes that spiritual blockage or subluxation, that's from years and years ago, and we don't even know it exists.
Right,
We
absolutely.
haven't worked on ourselves in hundreds of years, especially if we're not living in those kind of cultures that have a quote unquote shaman or medicine man or curandero or whatever label you want to give them.
Yep.
It's always been different, and that's one thing we look at too. Is I remember once I worked on a guy who had hay fever, and I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. We can try, and I went back, did a soul retrieval, found out he was in a barn that got caught on fire and a bunch of hay bales fell on him and he couldn't get out and he died. And it was roughly in the same area where he was living at, where he always had this allergic reaction to the hay. When he was outside of that area, like in a different country, he was fine. But every time he went back home, he would just have this horrible reaction, this allergic reaction, hay fever. And so we did a soul retrieval for that, and it helped him a little bit, but obviously, I haven't checked in with him now. It's been a few years, but I'd be curious to see if his symptoms have gone down even more after these years versus
Yeah,
someone just taking medicine all day.
exactly. It's pretty incredible to me where, and I'm going through it too with my husband right now, and some of the stuff that he's dealing with. And I mean, I respect everybody uniquely. We are married, but he does believe in some allopathic medicine, and he's getting some allopathic treatment right now. And and having to spend, he had to spend a week in a hospital recently. Um, those moments are teachers for me. But I also, instead of going into it kicking and screaming and being super defensive, I lead with who I am, what I'm doing, the education I have, and what I'm pursuing when I meet with his doctors. And to their credit, they have sat at the table and talked to me. It's been great. We've been teaching one another. It's interesting. Sometimes it's frustrating. Actually, this last round was extremely frustrating. And he's currently on and he's willing, and he's been taking this medication. And I did the research on the medication and then sat with him about it. And being able to look at these medications and being like, okay, so what are we ultimately trying to treat, heal, resolve, whatever you want to call it?
Hmm.
Okay, so you're going to take this pill that's going to do this thing, but also this is how this pill works, because this is how my brain works, right? I'm the perpetual 2-year-old. Why? But why? But why? But how? But why? So chasing these things down to their very bitter end and then going, okay, so what if I adjust this vertebra in this way that controls this neural pathway and improve the function of this organ and that organ and the brain here, and I tell the brain this and I tell the brain that, and it gets this input, and we do this thing, and we get the body to experience XYZ thing. Wouldn't that work the same way? And it's like, well, theoretically, yes. I'm like, okay, cool, then let's do it. Right? So that winds up in, like, super secret squirrel chiropractic adjustments in hospital rooms at 2 o'clock in the morning. But did it work? You betcha. So yeah, especially when you look at the opioid crisis, and bringing it home to something that you and I share and we're passionate about is veterans,
Hmm.
and looking at the opioid crisis in the veteran community, and then bringing it even closer into home into Thurston County, because segue into, I run a nonprofit. I've done some research, and there's over 32,000 veterans in Thurston County alone. Um, and then going deeper into the really depressing statistics about who is getting opioids in the mail, essentially, and getting told, take this thing so you can keep receiving these cool benefits that you desperately need in order to function, um, because money is real in the society, unfortunately. And, the system that requires this Ouroboros style system that it has to just constantly feed on itself and keep you in this oppressive system, which constantly keeps you energetically subluxated as well as physically subluxated and emotionally subluxated. Um, and then how do we address that? So how can we help them? And obviously it's people like you and me working in our community, the doctor that I work with right now, and countless other chiropractors, but that have the same philosophy of finding the true meaning of healing and resolving these issues, and being able to then allow people to be empowered and embodied. You can't exist in your own body and be embodied and empowered and all of these things if you are consistently subluxated energetically, emotionally, and physically. Your body's not a safe place. That's the root of trauma, right? Is the body's no longer safe. I can't exist in my body. I have to disassociate. It's not safe to be here. Going all the way back to my childhood, right? These environments that are good for me and the environments that are bad for me, where I act like a holy terror, obviously an environment needs to be changed. Where I act happy and relaxed and I'm calm and peaceful, creative, a joy to be around, all those things, those are the good environments. We're all just overgrown versions of me as a kid. We all just need to look at our environments and what's bringing out the best in us, what brings out the worst in us, what do we need to change? What does that look like? Does it look like taking a pill and numbing myself out even more? Well, pain is a whole other thing. Okay. You haven't asked the question yet, but I can sit here and talk about pain for hours and hours and hours. And it's probably my hyper focus right now in study is pain brain and the studies behind and the research behind pain brain, which is how I found Dr. Heidi Horvick. It's pretty impressive. It's groundbreaking stuff, and I'm really hoping that we can convince the VA to cover chiropractic care because we're the ones doing the research on pain without the use of opioids,
Hmm.
treating pain without the use of opioids, and we can do it. And we now have the research to prove that we can do it. But the VA doesn't want to hear it, which makes me go, wait, why do you not want to hear it? Because we can save you a lot of money. Oh, but wait, there's money in keeping people addicted to pills. I forgot. Oops.
Yeah, the VA was rough. I mean, I remember going there when I first got out. This was right after my third tour. I was angry all the time. I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I'm trying to get help because, I'm yelling at the wife, yelling at the kid, and he's like a year and a half at the time, and I don't understand what the hell I'm angry about. And then I get to the VA, and it's like, oh, well, here's the pill. Are you going to kill yourself? I was like, I'm not planning on it right now, but I'm kind of pissed off at everybody, They're like, well, here, just take this and go home, and then if you want, you can come to these group sessions, in the middle of the day when I'm trying to work a normal job and I just started with no leave. I'm like, yeah, do you have something after work on the weekends? Remote? Can we do something? Nope, that's what it is. It's like Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And take these pills. And then I took the pills for a little bit, but then you just stop caring about everything. I didn't want to do it anymore. And then got off the pills and started smoking a little bit of marijuana every night because that's what one therapist told me. He was like, just smoke a tiny bit each night. It'll help rewire the brain a little bit. I'm like, all right, cool. But then I'm just, you know, kids down. I'm done with work. I'm smoking a little bit. And then I just want to sit in front of the TV and eat all day. I was like, this is not the life I need.
Right? Yeah, this ain't it. This ain't it. And that's where I'm just like, what is it about these systems? And that's where I was like, when you stop and you really start asking hard questions, and you have to be willing to ask those hard questions, but you don't want to look at it. You're not full. And actually, the other thing of looking at, I mean, the mundane aspect is the brain doesn't work in a way that allows you to ask those hard questions because those drugs, those things that you're taking, those pills that you're popping, these medications they're prescribing actually don't allow those parts of the brain to function
Yeah.
because they want to keep you like down. So when you can get off of that stuff, then you can go, wait a minute, and then your brain starts functioning and you're like, oh shit, this ain't it. This ain't it at all. And you're willing to take hard looks and then step back and go, I want to get out of the system. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I want, and if you're, I mean, again, if you're like me, I wanted to be like, I want to treat the issue. I don't want to just treat the symptoms. I want it to be done and dusted. I want to move on. I want to have a good quality of life. I deserve better than this. But that's the key. And what I've experienced in being a lay chaplain, in working with Wounded Warrior Project, in working with Horses for Heroes, in working with you name the organization, and I've probably volunteered, supported, done whatever I can with them in some way. Um, what I see is like when you're in the system, you just don't believe that you have worth. What I experienced was like, wow, your head's down, especially if you're unhoused. Because speaking outside of the VA, there's a huge unhoused problem, obviously, in Thurston County. Any of us who live here can look around and go, shit, there's a lot of unhoused people out here and a lot
Washington
of
State.
unhoused children. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying Washington State in general.
Washington State General for sure. I try to keep it local because otherwise I find like super overwhelming and it's like really but just looking around in our community, ours because we're in the same neck of the woods, it's like okay, wow, there's a lot here, and so many of these folks they don't have self-worth, they don't have self-respect, And it's not because they are bad. That sounds like a make bad statement. No, it's not their fault. They have this. They're a victim of a system.
Mhm.
They got involved in that Ouroboros and they're just deep into it. And if you gave them a true option, you came to them and sat with them and like, do you really want to live this way? They're all going to tell you no. And they're always, do you want better for yourself? Yeah, absolutely. I just don't know how to get there. Or they don't, or they're just gonna shrug because they're despondent. Again, some of them are hooked on drugs or whatever. We're all just trying to treat a problem. We all have those subluxations. So what these people need, veteran, unhoused, insert thing here, you just need someone to come along and remove those subluxations. Everybody needs that level of healing, both the physical and the energetic. So I look at that and go, okay, how do we make that happen? How can we get that to people? What can we do? That's my why. That's my journey. And while I'm in school, because I've got a good 2.5 more years to chip away at this, so I started the nonprofit to be like, okay, so it's expensive. Unfortunately, going into Muggle land, this stuff is really expensive, but we have to charge money because society is icky, but it's real.
So why don't you go ahead and talk about the nonprofit for a minute so people know what that is and they
Oh,
can.
just some context. I keep like referring to it. Sorry. So access to alignment is literally what it is. It's access to alignment. It is getting folks um access to chiropractic care because like I firmly believe we remove those subluxations and we're getting people that ability to be whole and move into their own healing journey and get them happy, living better quality lives. It's just an extension of moving in love. Chiropractic philosophy, again, the one that I ascribe to, we follow Palmer. Palmer says, he's one of the founders of chiropractic, is the only love you keep is the love you give away. And so that for me looks a lot like being able to be Patch Adams. But going into Muggle land again, in the mundane, it's illegal to be Patch Adams. Go figure, right? You cannot give away medical care. Um, Especially if you take any kind of insurance, Medicare and VA included, you are definitely not allowed to give away any kind of care. In fact, you can lose your license. You can go to jail for giving away care. It's gross, it's icky, it makes me physically nauseous to think about it. But I learned these things working as a clinic director in a chiropractic office, and volunteering in different medical capacities over the years or and working in the medical system. Insurance companies do not allow providers to give away care, so you have to charge. And I don't want to burden anybody with the basics of it, but some sort of money has to change hands, a basic amount of copay, and it's individualized by contract with insurance companies and the provider themselves. So what happens, and anybody who's in the VA system, for example, knows that they determine when you can and can't get chiropractic care or massage care or this or that or whatever. They want you to come into their system. Other insurance companies are the same way. They determine, well, you can have 12 visits a year. Well, if you're in acute care, that's a month of care. Then beyond that, you're on your own. So sometimes, and especially insurance being so expensive, most people can't really afford to get this care. Um, and if you're in Medicaid, especially a child in Medicaid, like children in Medicaid can get care up to a certain age, but even those contracts are changing. Everyone's contracts are changing in January alone. So you're forced into allopathic healthcare, especially like if you're on Medicaid, they want you to go to a doctor and get a pill for your pain, which again, it doesn't make sense. Well, wouldn't it cost the insurance company less if you didn't need to go and see a physical therapist or go and pop a pill for pain or whatever? Wouldn't it be cheaper if you could just go to a chiropractor, get a subluxation addressed, get the correct amount of care for as long as you possibly need it, and then you're a cheaper patient. You're not having to have surgeries. You're not having to have a bunch of other really costly things for that insurance company. But no, that's not how the system works. So bringing it back to starting this nonprofit, what it does is it works like an angel fund in a vet's office. When people can afford veterinary care for their animal, other people can donate or pay over on their bill a little bit to allow for somebody else to have some care. Same concept.
Hmm.
So we have a nonprofit. It's based in Lacey. I'm getting my offices at Vert Chiropractic. I'm renting a room there because they believe in this too. And as I'm figuring out how to get it structured to make sure it's all going to work, and we're going through the federal process right now. So we're pending for our federal acceptance, which is really cool. But we are recognized by the state. We're real, we're honest, we're good. But we're accepting donations because we have tons of applications for care already. As the message gets out, people are like, wow, I really need this. And so to keep it on the up and up, it's you can apply for care. Um, see a chiropractor, bring in your application, we look it over, we can go, okay, 16 weeks of care, which really everybody is from jump, nearly everyone's authorized for that. And we figure out with the insurance company, with what, if any, patient contribution there can be to get people at least 16 weeks of care, and then be able to renew that application, see what it looks like moving forward, be able to get more funding, and then just keep going. So what it does is just allows the practitioner to legally operate and basically legally give away free care,
Hmm.
because it's just that's what it comes down to. It's just a fancy way of being able to be like, okay, this is what we have to do in order to allow for people to get care, but keep ourselves from getting in trouble, and keep the lights on, because at the end of the day, leasing an office is expensive. All of these things are expensive. It all requires money to make the world go around. And if we as practitioners gave away all of the care we wish we could, um, which, spoiler alert, is all of it, um, then we would all be in the poorhouse. We wouldn't have what we need to have in order to keep the lights on, because there's so many people that need care, so many people. So those that have the ability to give an energetic exchange, please give that energetic exchange and allow for the entire community to get the care that they need. And then we would magically see so many of these huge, quote, societal issues that most people find repugnant would resolve themselves. And hopefully the drug companies would go belly up. That's just me personally, but
And so with the clients coming in for this system, you're using donations to pay for their sessions. Do you still have to give a cut of that to the insurance companies, or is that strictly just going because you have to charge something to keep your insurance quotas or whatever?
we have to charge something, because if we don't charge, then the insurance companies can come after us, because it's like, we're charging them. They want us to charge everybody.
Okay.
But really, it's their own system. They're mad at themselves, essentially. That's what it comes down to. So yeah, no, I'm not paying an insurance company. It's the doctor has already figured out, like, well, this is, what patient responsibility is, but patient is unable to fulfill patient responsibility. So the nonprofit steps in and fulfills it for the patient.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
It's extremely cool. I'm so excited about it. There's a lot of chiropractors all across the country that are coming up with this too. So I don't get to have any credit for being cool on my own. And Dr. Marin is also the one who was like, yeah, this is what needs to happen. And I just need somebody to run it. And when he was telling me about it, I started crying. And I was like, this is beautiful, and I want to do it. I want to run it. I want to do it. This can be something that I can do. It also keeps me passionate while I slog through hard parts of school. So yeah, to keep the fire burning, where it's just like, nope, this is going to be an amazing thing. This is why it's so needed. And I can take the anger and ire that I feel towards the insurance companies and the drug companies, and um, turn that into focus and determination, and also keeps my toe in the community. And I keep meeting people and talking to people, and literally everyone that I explain what this does, nobody was like, I had no idea. And I was like, yeah, no, sure, there are some practitioners out there that are driving around in fancy cars, but the majority of the chiropractors that I know are not living high on the hog. They're not millionaires. They're really not. And they're just out there doing, quote, the Lord's work. Um, that really think we are. And we're not getting fat like MDs. And not all MDs, I'll say. There's some good ones out there for sure. But speaking as like the royal group, so it's like no, there's a disparity there and it's really obvious. And so yeah, just kind of look closely. Follow the money. Follow the money.
Yeah, and I don't, we talk bad about the VA, and I don't even want to really, I'm not talking bad about the doctors themselves too. Or even in the medical system, most of the doctors, they just really don't know better. They weren't trained differently. And
Yeah,
honestly, the ones that try, they get shut down so quickly that, if you step out of line, you're fired, basically. I mean, we saw that
absolutely.
a lot with COVID and everything else that happened. Anyone that had a different opinion was just, nope, you're out.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I talked briefly about Sadie Whip earlier. She's reclused herself from society completely. Like you have to find her. She doesn't market herself either. She's strictly word of mouth. She is the dragon mother. Prior to that, she self described hag in the woods. Just because if you speak really, too loud, you're gonna withstand a lot of attack and you're gonna get shut down and sometimes really violent bad things can happen to you if you're too loud. So it's and yeah, the other side of it is you cannot be what you cannot see. So in my other life, day job life of working in AV, minority sound guys don't really exist. And so I've tried to be a bright beacon there of being one of the few like really loud, obviously female and neurosparkly queer people in that industry, which is there's lots of people, but they just hide out because it's not traditionally that way. Um, but you cannot be what you cannot see. So in teaching and trying to encourage minorities in that world, in the theater world as well too, um, I took that to heart and I kind of reflected on the fact like, huh, yeah, I didn't really know about chiropractic. I didn't know about energy healing. I didn't know about those things because I wasn't exposed to them. I was mostly exposed to allopathic medicine. My mom was a nurse. I spent a lot of time getting taken when I was be with her and I was little, getting taken to work with her and sitting at the nurse's station in the emergency room in Baltimore City on the night shift. So I was a little kid experiencing some pretty crazy stuff. The hospitals were like home. It was like, okay, whatever. I'll talk a little bit about the fact that I won't say she was never officially a diagnosis, but maybe there was some Munchausen's by proxy because I was, quote, a really sick kid when I lived with my mom. Obviously, looking back, I was just really subluxated for obvious reasons and with just cause. But lots of, asthma, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. There was a little bit of some abuse, and I had to have some surgeries when I was little, and I have some scars. But, it's again, the allopathic healthcare system felt safe because it was what was normal. And coming into, and a lot of people are sus of chiropractic and osteopathic and holistic and naturopathic and homeopathic things because it's not normal, it's not standard, it's not what we're all exposed to all the time. There's no Grey's Anatomy in a holistic hospital, right? We don't see Dr. House in a chiropractic office. We don't see those things on TV. They're not considered mainstream. It's not considered normal. It's not society. It's not culture. It's not whatever. We're subversive. We're a subset. We're the underground. We're the weird crunchy granola people off the grid. We're, quote, the whack jobs because that's what society views us as. I've got dreadlocks. I leaned into it. I'm like, fine, you're gonna think I'm a freak. You think I'm weird? Okay, I'm covered in tattoos, piercings, and I got dreadlocks, but I'm smart enough to go sit in medical school and become a doctor. You just don't see people like me on TV. So you cannot be what you cannot see. So the more that we can be bold and get out there and show ourselves and be like, hey, no, there is an alternative. It's expensive because the government doesn't want to subsidize it, which is fine because I don't want to be their, whipping boy. I don't want to be their subservient, but there is an alternative. You just have to have some courage and some curiosity and come over here and try our cookies because they're good.
Yeah, which is sad because I mean, it's really only been 100 years, and I mean, I say only. That's like what 4 or 5 generations now at this point. But everything we do, that was the norm back in the day. That was what you did for thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, they started making drugs and making medical practices this quote unquote standardized way of doing things. And now we're stuck in this position we're in now.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah, yep. It's thick when you really start to study it.
even in Oregon now, they've legalized like microdosing. So I know some people that went down there to try to get on a microdose program, but they'll give them the synthetic version of a mushroom, the synthetic version of ayahuasca. And I'm like,
Hmm.
why? We can grow it right here. You can do it yourself. Like you don't, obviously don't do it if you're not knowing what you're doing, but
Yeah.
you can, these things grow in nature. We don't need to make a chemical version of the same thing you get naturally.
No, but and not to cut you off, but it's the bastardization of nature is what they're doing. It's just like the drug company. They're turning ayahuasca, psilocybin, microdosing into a for-profit corporation, just like drug companies.
Yep.
Because if you boil down literally and figuratively, all of these, quote, current drugs, they're synthetic versions of things that we can grow in the environment naturally, normally, but there's no profit in that. There's profit. Ask any farmer. There's barely a profit in organic, basic farming and gardening, unless you get people to believe in it. But the drug companies, obviously trillion-dollar business of bastardizing nature. But I'm glad you brought up the microdosing and the concept of all that because the studies that we're doing in the prefrontal cortex and how that works and microdosing, chiropractic, all of these holistic therapies and how it works in the prefrontal cortex and what the prefrontal cortex is responsible for in our executive function and society. Again, we could probably go off for, I know I could go off for another couple of hours talking about the prefrontal cortex and emotional control, experience of pain, and just how we move and function in the world today. And it's all controlled by our prefrontal cortex. And the things that we take are food, the use of electronics, and everyone's like, oh, there she goes. She put on her tinfoil hat. Now she's Dale Gribble. Well, yeah, but it's true. It's real. We have research. We have peer-reviewed, muggle acceptable forms of research on these things and the health of our prefrontal cortex and how it's being changed. And it's literally structurally, our brains are changing with what we are experiencing right here, right now, and the use of all of these devices.
Mhm.
So, what are we going to do to mitigate that? And how can we literally save ourselves and still move and function in the world today? But tie a rope around ourselves so that we stay safe and we stay in a healed, safe state, and on our own path of healing ourselves rather than just becoming another muggle drone and therefore being a victim and allowing ourselves to be a victim of society at large and allopathic medicine and for-profit healthcare.
Yeah, it's breaking out of that story and just looking for the alternatives, regardless of what others say about it. I mean, again, going back to the microdosing, I actually use that in my practice. If I have somebody with hardcore addiction or, there's something they got to work on that's really deep, and I find that just helps them get off of the SSRIs. I'll have them tell their doctor what we're doing. It's like, look,
Yeah,
go
totally.
work with your doctor, make a plan to start withdrawing. We'll start doing the microdosing with the shamanic sessions. And every time after a couple months, they're off the medication. Everything's better. Like it's possible. We just need to put the information out there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, and I fully full-throated support in all of that. It's the fear though is just everybody bearing in mind, like when I say tie a rope around yourself, I mean it. These things are not meant for you to come off of. This is addiction. I am working with the VA right now on the craft study projects, and it's fascinating that they're using an addiction model, a proven, tried and trusted model of therapy that is based in addiction medicine for the treatment of PTSD. And I support them. I think this is amazing. They're focusing on families. They're focusing on the communities around CPTSD veterans. And so I support it. I'm happy to be involved to help them fine tune it. It's open to anybody in the community that has direct contact, ideally spouses, but mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, best friends, roommates, whatever, with veterans, because they want to hear about our experience of living with and supporting our veteran, because they're now figuring out that successful intervention for CPTSD is within the home, within the support structure, within the community. And I'm like, finally, you're using the key word here, the community.
Okay.
You got to heal the community to help heal the veteran is what I used, because I didn't want to launch into my woo woo with them. I saved my woo woo for the right people. But it was just like, okay, yeah, let's learn. You're using words like healing and you're using words like community. Okay, there's hope. I'll come to your table, because you're using words where I'm like, oh, really? We're not going to talk. We're not going to use the other dirty words that you usually use. Okay, I love that for us. Um, so yeah, I'm happy to work with craft. I would like to see it change more, but the only way to affect change is to get involved. So that's why I'm mentioning it, being like, hey, this is something they're opening up to people. If you're in the community where you would qualify for something like that, please look up craft, because they need more people with spiritual mindsets, to get involved, to get it to be a spirit-led thing to affect the real healing, instead of just trying to get these guys into a talk therapy, guys and gals and spouses and everybody. We all need it, but they want to get away from talk therapy, but they need evidence that other things work. Even though, of course, we've given them evidence, but you gotta do it from the inside out. And so getting involved, and me on a weekly basis calling in and talking to people and being like, this is what works, this is what doesn't, will affect change.
That's good. So before we start wrapping up, I do got a couple other questions I want to get to. A
Yeah.
little bit different road of the chiropractic stuff, but one question I like to ask is, how has your definition of spirituality, or what is your definition of spirituality or higher power at this point? How has it evolved? What is it now?
That's a really good one. It's fun. So how it's evolved, of really being able to, oh, I don't know, it's spirit having and I'm going to use the analogy of chiropractic. We talk about living chiropractic, speaking chiropractic. Um, and what does that look like? What does that mean? And at first I was like, oh Lord, that sounds like I'm going to be a used car salesman talking about this. And then that feels disingenuous and inauthentic, and there's no integrity there. And so I'd stop and go, well, wait, what is it really like? And it's like, well, if you truly believe in what you're doing, and you truly like, this is it, this is your thing, then you are the thing. So it's the same thing with spirituality. It's being spirit led doesn't mean that I go to church on Sundays. It doesn't mean that I, pray. I don't do a thing that other people do, or look the same, or is the same. I might say God, I might say Lord, I might say goddess, all the gods, whatever. Spirituality for me is just, it's spirituality. It's a universal, it's thing. Everybody has their own intrinsic definition and way and demonstration of it. It doesn't, there's no make wrong, there's no make right, there's no universal here, there's no universal um yes or no. It is what it is. And as I've gone further along into my journey, and spirit looks different ways, like I've been talking about this whole conversation about how spirit came in and nudged.
Hmm.
And it's, for me, it's just that, again, intrinsic gut feeling. It's my bones, it's my ancestors, it's whatever. I'm 1/3 Cherokee. I lean into ancestors a lot. I'll say ancestors and medicine woman, medicine man. That is in my bones. What makes sense to me. It's what's right. It's my lineage, my pathway. My dad, I had limited interactions with my father before he passed away. But he was a medicine man as well, come to find out. So I was like, oh, that makes sense. It's genetic. It just comes naturally. It's bred into me. So I like to lean into that verbiage a little bit, and I found a lot of peace and a lot of like, ah, yeah, that's it. Oh, it all makes sense now. When I do, I've been learning the Cherokee syllabary and starting to speak and write in Cherokee, and it was like something clicked. And it was like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. I really understand concepts now when they're actually translated into this language that I've never naturally spoken, but apparently needed to learn. That's spirit.
Hmm.
That's an outside divine force coming in and interjecting into your life saying, hey, this is it. This is where to go next. So being divinely led or having spirit intervention, or anytime that I imagine the person I'm talking to saying a thing and then 30 seconds later they say that exact thing, um, I'm like, oh, hey, thanks, spirit. Or whatever. Like I saw you coming. I'm like, I'm gonna meet this dude that's gonna be like super rad. Um, didn't know what you looked like, didn't know who you were gonna be, but when I met you, I was like, oh, I saw you coming. It was a while ago, but hey, we're here now. It's cool. So things of that nature, like those, that to me is spirit led, and it's really, really cool. Or the ability to tap into that for me is huge. That's what I feel like when I'm doing an energetically led somatic quote Reiki healing, whatever session you want to call it. I'm just getting really deeply grounded and hooking into spirit and really listening to spirit and being like, spirit, lead me to where I need to be to channel your work for this human right now under my hands.
Hmm. I like that. Yeah, I find it interesting just to ask that question because everyone so far has been pretty similar, pretty the same, but it's always interesting to see how different viewpoints might affect that answer.
Yeah, it's a productive environment. Anytime I look back and it's like anytime that I was experiencing an environment where I was really symptomatic of alphabet soup, I feel like that was spirit being like, don't let them gaslight you. This isn't right for you.
Hmm.
And so but I didn't have the tools in the toolbox to advocate for myself for whatever reason in that situation. It was just spirit coming along and being like, no, this is wrong. Danger, danger, danger. You need to get to a better environment and quickly. You don't deserve this. This isn't right.
So speaking of that, so what advice would you give to somebody who's going down this path? Maybe they are also stuck in the alphabet soup, so to speak, or they're trying to figure things out. They haven't found their, quote unquote group of theater kids like you did, or
Yeah.
just what advice would you give to a young Rose out there?
This is a heavy one because I feel like my answer is ever evolving, and it would be to number one, listen to that compelling screaming voice deep in your gut, deep in your bones. Um, it's right. You're right. The situation is wrong. Um, you know, if you really truly don't feel like it's the right place, like feel, not my life would be so much easier if XYZ thing happened because we're pain averse and young Rose was extremely pain averse. Mature Rose knows that it's just pain. And you just need resilience and capacity to be able to sit and hold that pain. And right now, you're acutely traumatized. You don't have capacity. You don't have resilience. You don't have those things. And so, work with the tools in your toolbox until you can get better tools in your toolbox. Because that's something that I wanted to on my little talking points is like, I want to talk about pain brain and ability to withstand pain tolerance because so much of us we're programmed to just run away from pain, but sometimes you got to stand in it. But how do you stand in it when you don't have resilience and capacity? You got to go get it. Well, what does that look like? That looks like going on a healer's journey. And so if I could go and sit with 10, 15-year-old Rose, I'd say, look, this is a healer's journey and it's going to be okay. And you are truly here for a very magical and wondrous purpose. And It's gonna suck. There's gonna be good moments, there's gonna be bad moments, but there's beauty in all of it, and it all makes sense. It's all for a good reason. It's all for a good purpose. Um, don't give up. Don't give up hope. And if anything, like I think of The Last Unicorn, where it's like find the others. Um, and that was my favorite movie as a kid, and I finally understood it even kind of fairly recently. Like I not today years old recently, but pretty recently, where it was like, oh no, that's find the others. Oh wow, yeah, that's a whole journey in of itself. You're not alone. There's other people out there like you. You're not the bad one. The environment's just wrong. And find the better environment, find the others. Don't give up.
I guess with that, because I mean, some people might argue, well, I can't find the better environment right now because I'm 16 years old and I don't know, living in a small town in, I don't know, the Midwest or
Yeah, then
wherever.
make a plan.
But then it's, we have the internet now, so maybe find
Yeah,
an online community that
exactly.
that online
Yeah,
energy, which is,
that's yeah, the others are out there, and that's something I've experienced even within my own extended, married into family of my in-laws are all on the Eastern Washington side, and they not all of them fit into the Eastern Washington box, if you know what I mean. And and they're like, well, what do I do? Because they meet me and they're like, wow, you're different. And I'm like, yeah, I am different. Um, like, well, I'm different too. I just don't feel safe saying that. I'm like, oh, cool. Great. Okay. You don't have to tell me your flavor of different. That's fine. We're all different flavors. It's fine. Whatever. Um, okay. You finally got to meet somebody else. You don't have to conform. You don't have to give it because that's the whole thing, right? It was like you start trying to conform, you create all these energetic and emotional and physical subluxations. And it's like, no, 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 don't do that, friend. There's hope. There's answers. So if you're trapped in the wherever, Midwest or, down in California in a crazy, LA or whatever, and you're like, I just don't fit into this whole vibe, there's but you can't get out for whatever reason, then make a plan. That's what I kind of had to do. I realized at a certain age and a certain thing where I was like, I need to get the heck out of the East Coast. I'm not supposed to be over here. I'm not supposed to live this life. This ain't it. This ain't for me. But I didn't have the means to get out at that time. And it was like, well, be open. Spirit will provide. Like, you just got to be open to it.
Mhm.
And so when there was like things that kept perpetually coming up, and I would be like, no, 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 that's not right. It doesn't look like how I think it was going to look like. And then I had to catch myself being like, what if it's not going to look like how I think it's supposed to look like? Because I'm not spirit. I'm cool, but I'm not that cool, right? So, okay. Um, Sometimes opportunities look weird. And I took one of those weird looking opportunities and then, ended up on the path. So yeah, it's don't give up and find the others. It's a lot easier now. I laugh at 17-year-old me wanting to be a professional sound woman and being told back in the 90s that women don't do that job. Well, that's poo-poo caca. Um, but back then I looked around and I was like, well, that's true. I don't see any other women sound engineers in professional theater and live music, especially live music. I was like, oh wow, I don't see that. Just a bunch of crusty old white guys that are talking about me in ways that I find offensive. Okay, cool. I don't want to be in this environment. So I walked away. Um, yeah, and then fast forward now, I'm in my spare time, ha ha ha. I'm trying to make change with those manufacturers of sound equipment to be like, hey, look, no, you can see there's a woman behind this console. There's actually a lot of women behind consoles. So it's the same concept. I think there's a burden in our community to reach out to, the 10-year-old Roses and Jeremy's and everybody else and be like, no, there's alternatives. So, but then those people that need community need to be looking for them too.
Mhm. And so before we wrap up, is there anything else about your journey that you feel is important to share?
Um, wow, Wow, that's a loaded question, right?
We've gone through the gambit already, but maybe
Yeah, really, I've gone through quite the gambit.
maybe you feel there's
Um,
something you still want to touch on that you just haven't yet before we wrap up.
Um, no, I mean, like I said, I could have a whole TED talk and it's a joke, but it's not. I'm actually trying to formulate one. I've had some friends that have done some that are just amazing, and I'm like, I want to be as cool as you. Not for an ego trip, but because there's just so much good, juicy stuff that I feel like, entertaining and engaging and charismatic people need to get out there and talk about it. Um, because like I said, I could have a whole other talk on just the whole like your brain's lying to you. No, really, it is. And pain brain is different. And a comment that a practitioner made the other day when we were trading work, and he was just like, it's just pain. And I'm like, huh? Because I was like, like he was like, ow. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And he's like, don't apologize. You're not sorry for causing me, you're not sorry for giving me that adjustment. It's like, no, I'm not. He's like, well, it's just pain. Oh, don't apologize for pain. Like pain's a whole concept that I can't wait to talk about um in more detail, and I'm excited to be part of the research around it and being able to change people's, reframe our idea of pain and concept of pain. Um which is both muggle and magical all at the same time. It's really cool. So that's really the only thing I would try to tell anybody who's experiencing being like, well, I can't go to a chiropractor. I can't stop taking the pills. I can't do this. I can't. Pain, pain, pain. Ow, ow, ow. Ruining my life, making me stressed out, upping my cortisol levels, all of these things. And it's like, well, upping your cortisol level is not necessarily a bad thing. We need stress. We need cortisol in our brain to actually do anything.
Mhm.
Without cortisol, we would be like you were talking about before. You would smoke out, and I don't cast aspersions on any herbal medicine, man. I love it. I think I'm full throated. Use it responsibly, but too much is too much. If all you do is sit on the couch and eat potato chips,
Yep.
then you're not doing anything, because in a very, 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 very basic breakdown, it inhibits some cortisol. So we're just not stressed out. We feel nothing, man. It's all great. I'm like, yeah, it's all great. That's wonderful in moderation. But you need a little bit of cortisol. You need a little bit of healthy stress to get your booty up off the couch and do things. Why do you feel better after you exercise? Even if exercise hurts, you still get some hits of some cool neurochemicals that make you feel good. Well, that's because some of that was some cortisol, with some stress, with some things, and we need those things. So there's good healthy ways to get off the pills. There's good healthy ways to manage your stress. Even if you're in sitting here, you're listening to this, and you're like, I am in so much pain, you don't understand. I can be like, no, I really do. I didn't talk about my own pain journey and my own pain management. I don't need to. It's not relevant and important, except for it is just pain. Like the practitioner that was teaching me in the class I was taking, being like, no, it's just pain. Don't apologize. You're not sorry you gave me the adjustment. Don't be sorry about the pain that came with it. That was the price to pay, and it was worth it. It's okay. It's just pain. It doesn't last, and it does end, and it's over, because now I moved into resolving that subluxation. I feel so much better. Thank you for giving me that pain. And I had to stop and go, holy shoot, that's a mind-blowing concept. And I'm going to now go and sit and look up all these articles about pain and the pain brain. And I did. I merged 3 hours later, and I was like, holy crap, this needs to get out there. But oh, it would screw up the drug company, so it's not going to. Shoot.
And that reminds me of another question I was going to ask real quick. The nonprofit that you have, do you plan on expanding that? So, I mean, would you actually look at expanding that to acupuncture care or maybe even energy work, for example, and try to be more holistic in
Uh,
approach?
Absolutely. It's the thing. It's kind of, yeah, I would love to. Honestly, it's just I wanted Dr. Merrim, who helped me found it. We wanted to come up with a way, like, we want this to be really patent, really like capable, make sure it's feasible, make sure it's going to work, make sure it's healthy, it's above board, we're doing everything right. So we started very small, just keeping it like in-house, where I was like, you're my guinea pig. I want to be able to make sure that this is going to work the right way. that the money comes in, that the grants come in, that I don't get in trouble with the federal government. And it also was like, it hurt both of our brains to be like, we're creating a system to fight against a system. We're dealing with money. We're doing like all sorts of dirty, icky things that our brains just don't like to grok. And like, so it's been kind of an uphill battle because I'm like, oh, this is just awful. I hate it. We're creating a thing that we're fighting against. But I'd love to ultimately expand it. And I've been talking to other things like Returning Veterans Project, which is another really cool one. My school's clinic is completely free because we're students, right? So we can give away free care
Mhm.
because we're students. But my attending works with Returning Veterans Project to make sure that we're giving free care to the people who need it most. And so we work with veterans in our clinic in Portland. So it's like really cool. But to be able to get that same situation up here, well, that's a whole other topic of conversation of the Washington Chiropractic College that we're hoping to be able to get started and do so we could have the exact same situation up here. But until that happens, access to alignment has to exist to be able to get free care, or at least reduce cost care or whatever we can do to offset, it's right now, I can't make it completely free. I just don't have the money coming in.
Yeah.
But eventually, yeah, we'd be able to find a way of having it be free, or at least as small as possible. Energetic exchange is a whole other topic of conversation, but because there does need to be an investment on the patient side, right? You got to put some skin in the game. Um, what does that look like? It's its own whole thing. Maybe in a future way, it could be that patients giving back to access to alignment in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't always have to be financial. Um, I have lots of dreams. I'll just leave it there. Lots of dreams and lots of things I want to have happen, but the community needs to embrace it and step in, throw their shoulder behind it, and help it get out there. And then because there's lots of practitioners that are hearing about it being like, great, how do I sign up? I want to contribute. I want to be a practitioner in the organization. And I'm like, man, I just need more help to get it off the ground. It's just me, and I'm teaching myself how to do this as I go. And nonprofits are tricky.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're open to talking to people to join the board, treasury, financing, all of these things that just make my head swim. I'm really good at what I'm really good at. I'm not really good at a lot of things like, the financial stuff and whatnot. So yeah, it just takes a lot to make dreams work.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like it's a good cause and it'll get there eventually. I was just curious what the long-term plan, so to speak, because it's an interesting concept. I mean, I do a lot of trades even of my own, business. I've traded for acupuncture, I've traded for chiropractor, I've traded for sound healing. It's like, let's make a trade. Why bother changing this money when we can just each do a service for each other? But as you said,
Yeah.
services and trades don't pay the rent. I can't go to my mortgage broker and say, yeah, I'll do a session on you if you waive my mortgage fee for this month. It'd be nice, but it doesn't.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when it comes to chiropractic, we want chiropractic to be considered on the same par as medical doctors and healing and have the muggles like fully embrace us. But then we have to play by muggle world rules. And I make the joke of like this is the tax that we have to pay. Because once upon a time your chiropractor could barter with you. Your chiropractor can't legally do that anymore.
Yeah.
If your chiropractor is taking any kind of, insurance, VA, whatever, and if you want to be available to those populations, again, the populations who need us most, like Medicare, VA, Medicaid, then you have to take those contracts. But then now you're bound to those contracts. It's just this huge, icky circle of ick. So it's like, and anytime that a practitioner like us does, do a barter deal or whatever, it's like this never happened. And we can't claim it at all. This care never happened. This never existed. And that just is not helping us become, proving the authenticity to the rest of the world. So it's like we shouldn't have to operate in secret. We shouldn't have to operate this way. Um, so yeah, unfortunately, no, we're gonna have to do this thing. So it's a necessary, not great. It's not an evil, but it's a necessary, not great. And so here we are. And that's why, yeah, I want to open this up. I want to have as many practitioners as possible, serving as many people as possible. I want to grow it beyond Thurston County and Washington State and all the things. I want it to be a big, alternative. Like an RVP has, returning veterans has the same goal and they're doing it. I'm so proud of them. And yeah, I'm finding more and more. Just that thing when you start looking, you start finding.
Mm.
So the more research I do and the more I look around and the more I'm like, okay, well, other organizations, how do they do this thing? Oh, wait, there's another organization that's like me. Cool. How are they doing it? I'm gonna call them up and talk to them about it. So yeah, it's cool.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to start wrapping it up. It's been really great having you on. It's also good
Yay,
just to catch up with you. It's been a while.
I know.
So why don't you go ahead and one more time let people know about the nonprofit or where they can find you if they want to reach out to you. We'll put everything in the show notes as well, but if you just want to plug anything real quick before we call it a day.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So the nonprofit is Access, ACCESS, to TO Alignment, ALIGNMENT .org. It's baby basic website because I made it, so don't make fun of it. And if you can do it better, reach out, let me know, and yeah, let's talk. Um, so that's where you can donate online. So I do have that set up. So we go, it's nice and safe and secure, go straight to the bank. So any amount, I don't care how little. Giving Tuesday, I think I got even a couple $3 donations. And I was like, bless you. That was what you gave and you chose to share that with me. I am so I love it. All the way up to a couple $100. I was like, oh my goodness, thank you. Energetically, it's amazing. Whatever is possible because it all really truly helps. Sometimes is a course of like $3 is what makes all the difference in the world for somebody. And then for just me personally, if you want to talk about cool stuff, nerd out, get a coffee, whatever, I'm happy to have people reach out to me directly through my Instagram for Aquila Alchemy. And that's how you can also, if you want to do a session with me, that's what that looks like. So yeah, I'm not a licensed chiropractor. I'm not a doctor yet. And I am not an LMT, so everything I do is energetics and somatics and cool stuff. And yeah, it's amazing. Or, you're like, who was that person you were talking about? You can reach out to me that way as well. Um, on Instagram. If you don't have Instagram, you can email me, lilithaquilla@gmail.com. And I can happily, be that medicine woman, wayfinder person to help people find people or whatnot, wherefore. I live for that. Be awesome. Or just to listen because you're a 10-year-old version of me and you need support. I'm happy to do that.
Cool. Well, thank you. It's been really good.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Shaman Stories podcast. If you have any interest in the services that I provide or the services of my guest, please click the link in the show notes below. Thank you. And until next time, have a good journey.